She left the party with another guy, said, "It just happened." I just said, "Okay." Now she's the one begging. Looking back, I realize that some relationships crumble so slowly you don't notice until you're standing in the rubble. I thought my 3-year relationship with Isabella was rock solid, built on shared dreams and quiet Sunday mornings in our Portland apartment. I'm Derek, a software engineer who believed in showing love through consistency rather than grand gestures, and Isabella was this vibrant marketing coordinator who used to say my steady presence made her feel safe in a chaotic world. But somewhere between year 2 and 3, that safety apparently became suffocating. The changes started subtly. Isabella would check her phone during our conversations, scrolling through messages with this secretive smile I'd never seen before. "Work stuff," she'd say when I glanced over, angling the screen away from me. When I mentioned feeling like we weren't connecting lately, she'd roll her eyes and tell me I was being paranoid. "You're reading into everything, Derek. Not every text is a conspiracy." But my gut told me something fundamental had shifted. She started attending more work events and social gatherings without me, claiming they were boring networking things that would only annoy me. Yet she'd come home energized, talking animatedly about colleagues I'd never heard of, especially this new sales guy who apparently had everyone at the office laughing with his stories from New York. "Damien's actually really funny," she'd say, then catch herself. "I mean, you'd probably find him annoying, but the team loves his energy." When I suggested joining her at the next happy hour to meet these people who were occupying so much of her time, Isabella's face would tighten. "You don't really like those kinds of events anyway. You always complain about small talk." She wasn't wrong. I preferred genuine conversations to networking chatter, but the dismissal stung. Our mutual friends started noticing the tension during game nights and dinner parties. Isabella would position herself across the room from me, gravitating toward other men in our group with a flirtatiousness that felt performative, like she was proving something. "Everything okay with you too?" my friend Marcus asked during a barbecue where Isabella spent the entire evening laughing at another guy's jokes while barely acknowledging my presence. "Just going through a rough patch," I told him, still believing we could work through whatever was happening. I suggested couples therapy, thinking maybe a neutral space would help us reconnect. "Our problems are all in your head, Derek," Isabella snapped when I brought up making an appointment. "You're the one creating issues where none exist. Maybe you should go to therapy yourself if you're this insecure." The word, insecure, landed like a slap. Here I was, trying to save our relationship, and she was making me feel like the problem for noticing our foundation was cracking. But I kept hoping this was just a phase, that the woman who used to curl up against me watching Netflix was still there underneath this stranger who seemed to resent my very existence. The final warning sign came during what should have been a simple dinner at our favorite Italian place, the same restaurant where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. Isabella spent the entire meal texting, claiming it was an urgent work crisis that required immediate attention. "Can't it wait an hour?" I asked, watching her fingers fly across the screen while her pasta grew cold. "Some of us have demanding careers, Derek," she replied without looking up. "Not everything runs on your 9-to-5 programmer schedule." The contempt in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the woman who used to brag about my promotion at the tech company, who said my problem-solving mind was one of the things she loved most about me. This was someone who saw my stability as boring, my reliability as predictable, my love as insufficient. I paid the check while she continued typing, and we walked home in silence that felt heavier than any argument. That night, lying in bed while she scrolled through her phone with the brightness turned down, I realized I was living with someone who had already emotionally left our relationship. The apartment we'd decorated together now felt like a hotel where two strangers happened to share a lease. Isabella's side of the bathroom counter was cluttered with new makeup and perfumes I'd never seen her buy, and she'd started working out obsessively, claiming she needed to invest in herself. Every change felt like preparation for something I wasn't part of, and the woman beside me had become a beautiful stranger who tolerated my presence rather than welcomed it. The company retreat invitation arrived like a last-ditch opportunity to salvage what we'd built together. Isabella's marketing firm was hosting their annual weekend getaway in Oregon's wine country, and spouses and partners were specifically invited to join the team-building activities and vineyard tours. "You should come," Isabella said, though her tone suggested she was extending the invitation out of obligation rather than genuine desire for my company. "It might be fun to get away for the weekend." I should have recognized the setup, but I was still clinging to hope that a change of scenery might remind us why we'd fallen in love in the first place. The resort was one of those upscale places with infinity pools overlooking rolling vineyards, the kind of location that should have felt romantic but instead highlighted how disconnected we'd become. Isabella's energy shifted the moment we walked into the welcome reception. She practically vibrated with excitement, scanning the room until her eyes landed on him. Damian Walsh stood near the bar, all expensive cologne and perfectly styled hair, holding court with a group of colleagues who hung on his every word about New York nightlife and Manhattan real estate deals. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for luxury watches, and I could see why Isabella's head turned when he flashed that practiced smile in our direction. "Isabella, you made it," Damian called out, approaching us with the confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. "And you must be the famous boyfriend I've heard so much about." His handshake was firm to the point of being aggressive, and his eyes assessed me like I was competition he'd already decided wasn't worth worrying about. "Derek," I said simply, noting how Isabella's cheeks flushed pink when Damian complimented her dress. "Amazing choice, Isabella. That color brings out your eyes perfectly." The compliment was smooth, practiced, delivered with just enough professional distance to seem innocent while carrying an undertone that made my jaw tighten. Isabella glowed under his attention in a way she hadn't with me in months. "Thanks, Damian. Derek helped me pick it out," she said, though I distinctly remembered her buying the dress during a solo shopping trip she'd claimed was for work clothes. The lie was small but telling. She was already rewriting our story to minimize my presence in her life. Dinner was torture disguised as team bonding. Isabella positioned herself directly across from Damian at our table of 8, leaving me sandwiched between two accountants who spent the entire meal discussing tax code updates. I watched my girlfriend transform into someone I barely recognized, laughing too loudly at Damian's stories about client dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants and weekend trips to the Hamptons. "You're so lucky to have traveled so much," Isabella gushed, her eyes sparkling with something I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Portland must feel so small after New York." "It has its charms," Damian replied, his gaze lingering on her face. "Though I'm discovering some unexpected treasures here that make the transition worthwhile." The double meaning wasn't lost on anyone at the table, and I felt heat rise in my chest as Isabella practically preened under his attention. When I tried to join the conversation by mentioning a recent project at work, Isabella's expression glazed over. "Derek's a software engineer," she explained to Damian with the enthusiasm of someone describing dental work. "He builds applications for small businesses." "Fascinating," Damian said with the kind of polite disinterest reserved for subjects that bored him. "I'm more of a big-picture guy myself. Strategic partnerships, market expansion, that sort of thing." The message was clear. His work mattered on a larger scale than mine, his ambitions were grander, his lifestyle more exciting. I was small-time compared to his big-league energy. After dinner, the group migrated to the resort's outdoor bar where string lights created an intimate atmosphere that should have been romantic. Instead, I sat alone at our table, nursing a beer while Isabella positioned herself directly next to Damian on the curved sectional sofa, their knees touching as she leaned in to hear his stories over the background music. Her hand found his arm when she laughed, lingering there in a way that made my stomach turn. "You two seem to be hitting it off," I said when Isabella finally returned to check on me around 11. "Damian's just really interesting," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "He's lived such an exciting life compared to—" She caught herself before finishing the sentence, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. "Compared to me. Compared to our quiet life. Compared to everything she was apparently desperate to escape." "Maybe we should head back to the room," I suggested, gesturing toward the elevators. "It's getting late. The night's still young, Derek. Don't be such a grandpa." The dismissal stung, especially delivered in front of her coworkers who pretended not to notice the tension. "You go ahead." I'm finally having fun for once. The phrase, for once, hit like a physical blow, suggesting that our entire relationship had been one long exercise in boredom punctuated by this single evening of excitement provided by another man. I stood up, finished my beer, and looked down at my girlfriend who was already turning back toward Damien's magnetic presence. "I'll see you upstairs," I said quietly. "Sure," she replied without looking at me. "I'll be up soon." But when I woke up at 6 a.m. to sunlight streaming through our room's floor-to-ceiling windows, Isabella's side of the bed was still untouched, sheets pulled tight and pillow undisturbed. My calls went straight to voicemail, and the hollow feeling in my chest told me everything I needed to know about where she'd spent the night. The text message arrived at exactly 12:17 p.m. while I was sitting in the resort's breakfast area, staring at untouched scrambled eggs. "Something happened last night. We need to talk when I get back." No apology, no explanation, just a clinical announcement delivered like a weather report. I read it 3 times, waiting for some emotion to hit: rage, devastation, the urge to storm up to Damien's room and demand answers. Instead, I felt something closer to relief, like a fever finally breaking after months of sickness. The uncertainty was over. The pretending could stop. I typed back 2 words: "I understand." Then I did something that would later shock everyone who knew me as the guy who fought for relationships, who believed in working through problems. I blocked Isabella's number. Blocked her on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere she might try to reach me with explanations or justifications designed to make me feel guilty for not fighting harder. I packed my weekend bag methodically, left the resort without checking out of our room, let her handle that conversation, and drove the 2 hours back to Portland in complete silence. Back at our apartment, I moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this moment subconsciously for weeks. Isabella's clothes went into garbage bags, her books into boxes, her toiletries into a plastic container sealed with packing tape. Every item told a story of the woman I'd thought I knew: the coffee mug from our first vacation, the sweater I'd bought her last Christmas that she'd worn exactly once, the framed photo of us from Marcus's wedding where her smile looked genuine. I left that photo face down in the box, unable to throw it away but unwilling to look at evidence of whatever I'd imagined we'd had. The locksmith arrived within 3 hours of my call, a weathered man who didn't ask questions when I explained I needed the locks changed immediately. "Happens more than you'd think," he said, installing new deadbolts with practiced efficiency. Smart move, getting ahead of the drama. By 6 p.m., her belongings were stacked neatly in the building's lobby with a note for the concierge: "Please hold for Isabella Rodriguez. She'll arrange pickup." I took a week off work and called my brother David in Seattle. "I need a place to think for a few days," I told him. "Doors always open," he said without hesitation. David's guest room became my refuge, a place to process 3 years ending in a single weekend. On day 3, David finally asked, "So what happened with Isabella?" "She chose someone else. At her company retreat. Spent the night with him, then texted me about it." David waited for more, probably expecting anger or plans for revenge. When none came, he looked almost concerned. "That's it? You're just done? What else is there?" "She made her choice. I'm making mine." "But don't you want to fight for what you built together?" The question I'd been avoiding. Did I want to fight? The honest answer was no, and that realization was more liberating than devastating. Fighting would mean accepting that what we'd had was worth saving, and the woman who could discard 3 years for one exciting weekend wasn't someone I wanted to fight for. "You can't fight for someone who's already left," I told him. When I returned to Portland, our mutual friends were buzzing with confusion. Marcus called first. "Dude, Isabella's been trying to reach you all week. She says you won't answer her calls." "I blocked her number." "She's pretty upset. Says you won't even let her explain what happened." "Nothing to explain. She spent the night with another guy, then told me about it. That's explanation enough." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, "That's really it? You're just walking away without hearing her side?" "Her side of what?" "There's no version of this story where sleeping with her coworker was an accident. She made a choice. Now I'm making mine." My calm response seemed to unnerve everyone more than tears or rage would have. They expected me to be destroyed, to spend weeks calling Isabella drunk at 2 a.m., to show up at her office demanding closure. Instead, I was sleeping 8 hours a night, meal prepping on Sundays, going to the gym consistently. The Derek they knew would have fought. This Derek was apparently someone they didn't recognize. Within 2 weeks of the retreat, Isabella and Damien's relationship went public in the most nauseating way possible. Their Instagram feeds became a carefully curated showcase of expensive dinners, weekend getaways to wine country, and couple photos that screamed, "Look how much better this is than whatever I had before." Isabella posted a picture of them at some upscale steakhouse downtown with the caption, "Finally found someone who knows how to treat a woman right, sparkles #blessed #new chapter." The passive-aggressive dig wasn't subtle, but it confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't just about attraction. This was about lifestyle, status, the intoxicating promise of being swept away by someone whose credit card had a higher limit than mine. Damien's posts were equally performative, all smooth captions about finding unexpected treasures in the Pacific Northwest and life's too short for ordinary experiences. Every photo featured Isabella looking radiant beside him at places I could never have afforded, Michelin-starred restaurants, luxury resorts, private wine tastings that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Marcus showed me the posts despite my explicit requests not to see them. "Dude, you need to see what she's writing," he said, shoving his phone in my face during lunch. "This one's definitely about you." The post featured Isabella in a flowing dress at some vineyard, arms outstretched, with a caption about breaking free from relationships that dim your light and never settling for someone who can't match your energy. The comment section was full of her girlfriends cheering her on with flame emojis and "You deserve this, queen" responses. "She's really trying to rewrite history," Marcus observed, "making it sound like you were holding her back or something." "Maybe I was," I said, surprising him. "Maybe she needed someone who could afford to take her to Napa every weekend. That was never going to be me." But the public display felt desperate, like she was trying to convince herself as much as everyone else that she'd made the right choice. The frequency of posts was almost manic, 3 or 4 updates per day documenting every expensive meal, every luxury experience, every moment of her supposedly upgraded life. She started attending all our usual hangout spots with Damien, places where she knew our mutual friends would see them together. The brewery where we used to play trivia became their regular date spot, with Isabella posting stories that captured our old table in the background like she was marking territory. The coffee shop where I'd written code on weekend mornings suddenly featured heavily in her Instagram stories, showing elaborate brunch spreads that cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a week. The friend group was splitting exactly as I'd expected. Isabella's college friends rallied around her narrative that she'd been emotionally neglected and deserved someone who prioritized her happiness. My closer friends, the ones who'd witnessed our relationship firsthand, were more skeptical. "She's posting way too much," David observed during one of our weekend calls. "Happy people don't need to document every moment for social media validation." The most telling post came 3 weeks after their debut as a couple. Isabella shared a photo of an enormous bouquet of roses with a caption about being with someone who understands grand gestures matter. The implication was that I'd been too cheap or thoughtless to surprise her with expensive flowers, conveniently forgetting the dozens of small, meaningful gestures I'd made, bringing her coffee when she was stressed, remembering her favorite cookies, staying up late to help her prepare for presentations. But those gestures didn't translate well to Instagram, didn't generate the kind of envy she was apparently craving. The breaking point for several mutual friends came when Isabella posted a long-form caption about toxic relationships that painted our entire 3-year history as emotional prison she'd finally escaped. She wrote about feeling unappreciated and taken for granted by someone who couldn't see her worth, carefully avoiding names while making it obvious who she meant. "That's complete bullshit," Marcus said after reading it. "You worship that girl. You paid for everything, planned every vacation, remembered every anniversary. How is that taking her for granted?" But I was beginning to understand that Isabella's version of being appreciated meant being treated like a prize rather than a partner. Damien's expensive gestures satisfied something in her that my quiet, consistent love never could. She wanted to be pursued, conquered, displayed like a trophy that proved her boyfriend's success. I'd loved her like a partner. She'd wanted to be loved like an acquisition. The final insult came when she started showing up at events where she knew I'd be present, always with Damien in tow, always dressed to kill and laughing just a little too loudly at his jokes. The message was unmistakable. Look what you lost, look how much better I'm doing, look how exciting my life is now. But watching her perform happiness for an audience just made me grateful I was no longer responsible for managing her insecurities and need for constant validation. The downfall came exactly 3 months after Isabella's public debut with Damien, and it was more spectacular than anything I could have imagined. I was working late on a database migration when Marcus called, barely able to contain his excitement. "Dude, you need to sit down for this. Damien's ex-wife just nuked Isabella's entire world." Apparently, Catherine Walsh had been quietly documenting her husband's pattern of workplace affairs for months before their divorce was finalized. She'd hired a private investigator who'd captured compromising photos and screenshots of Damien's messages with multiple coworkers, including several from his previous job in New York. Isabella wasn't his first conquest. She was just the latest in a long line of women he'd used to climb corporate ladders and boost his ego. Catherine sent everything to Isabella's HR department, Marcus continued, his voice filled with schadenfreude. Photos, text messages, hotel receipts, the whole evidence package. Turns out Damien's been running this same playbook for years: target younger coworkers, promise them upgraded lifestyles, use the relationships to gain inside information, then move on when it suits him. The investigation was swift and brutal. Isabella's company had strict policies about workplace relationships that created conflicts of interest. Damien had been using information from Isabella about client accounts and marketing strategies to advantage his own sales numbers, essentially insider trading with relationship benefits. Within 2 weeks, Damien was terminated for ethics violations, and Isabella was demoted from marketing coordinator to entry-level assistant with a formal reprimand in her file. But the professional consequences were just the beginning. Damien's response to getting fired was to throw Isabella completely under the bus in the most public way possible. He posted a lengthy Facebook rant that painted her as a manipulative seductress who destroyed his marriage and career. "Some women will do anything to climb the social ladder," he wrote. "I was a faithful husband until Isabella Rodriguez decided she needed a man who could afford her expensive tastes. She pursued me relentlessly, showing up at my hotel room during the company retreat, seducing me when I was vulnerable. Now she's cost me my job and my family." The post included private photos from their relationship, intimate details about their conversations, and a breakdown of exactly how much money he'd spent on her in 3 months, over $15,000 on dinners, trips, and experiences that had funded her Instagram lifestyle. He claimed she'd manipulated him while actually using him for financial gain, projecting his own behavior onto her with stunning audacity. The comments section became a battlefield. Catherine Walsh chimed in with her own receipts, posting screenshots of Damien's messages where he bragged about landing the hottest girl in the Portland office and detailed his strategy for keeping her interested with expensive experiences until something better comes along. The evidence was overwhelming. Damien had played her exactly the way she'd played me, just with more money and less genuine affection. Portland's business community is smaller than people realize, and gossip travels fast through professional networks. Within days, everyone in marketing circles knew about the scandal. Isabella's reputation went from rising star who knew her worth to the girl who slept her way into a demotion and public humiliation. Companies started rescinding networking invitations, professional contacts stopped returning calls, and her LinkedIn presence became a liability. "She's been calling everyone in our friend group," Jenny reported during coffee. "Asking if people have heard from you, wanting to know how you're handling everything. I think she's realizing that burning bridges with the one person who actually cared about her wasn't strategic." The Instagram posts stopped abruptly. No more luxury dinners, no more wine country weekends, no more captions about finding someone who knows how to treat a woman right. Isabella's social media went dark for weeks, then slowly returned with generic motivational quotes about learning from mistakes and growing stronger through adversity. Marcus kept me updated despite my protests. She got evicted from her apartment. Turns out she'd been counting on Damien's income to cover rent increases. Now she's staying with her sister in Beaverton and taking the Max train to work because her car got repossessed. The transformation was swift and total. Isabella went from trendy Pearl District lofts to sharing a bedroom with her sister's infant daughter in suburban Portland. Designer clothes got sold on Poshmark, expensive skincare became drugstore basics, and the woman who'd left me for Michelin-starred dinners was now packing lunches on an assistant salary. The best part, Marcus continued, is that Damien moved back to New York the week after he got fired. Left her with absolutely nothing except Instagram posts she probably wishes she could delete. He's already moved in with some new girl, probably running the same scam in a different city. I felt something unexpected, pity. Not the kind that made me want to rescue her, but distant sympathy for anyone who'd made such catastrophically bad decisions. Isabella had traded 3 years of genuine love for 3 months of performed happiness, and now she was discovering the difference between being cherished and being used. The desperate campaign to win me back started about 2 weeks after Damien's public humiliation post went viral. It began with fake Instagram accounts following me and liking old photos from before we'd even broken up. Then came friend requests from obviously fake Facebook profiles with generic names, all featuring stock photos and empty timelines. I blocked them without a second thought, but the pattern was unmistakable. Isabella was trying to monitor my life from the shadows. When fake accounts didn't work, she escalated to enlisting our mutual friends as intermediaries. Isabella asked me to give you this, Jenny said awkwardly during coffee, sliding a handwritten letter across the table. She said she knows you blocked her everywhere, but she really needs you to read this. The letter was 3 pages of emotional manipulation disguised as accountability. Isabella detailed her therapy sessions, complete with insights about her fear of vulnerability and pattern of self-sabotage. She wrote about growing up with parents who fought about money, how that had made her equate financial security with love, how she'd mistaken Damien's expensive gestures for genuine care. I know I hurt you in ways that words can't fix, she wrote. But I'm working on myself now. I'm learning to value the right things, to appreciate real love instead of chasing fantasies. You were everything I needed, and I was too blind to see it. The letter included screenshots of therapy appointments, as if documentation would prove her sincerity. She even included a journaling exercise listing all the ways I'd shown love that she'd failed to appreciate, bringing coffee when stressed, remembering favorite songs, staying up late to listen to work frustrations. I read it once, felt absolutely nothing and threw it away. The letters continued arriving through various friends over the following weeks. Marcus received one, then David in Seattle, then even my coworker Jason who'd met Isabella twice. Each letter escalated in desperation and promised greater personal transformation. She was seeing a therapist twice weekly, attending church, volunteering at a homeless shelter to learn gratitude. She deleted all social media to focus on real connections. She was reading self-help books and taking financial literacy courses. She's really working hard to change, Marcus told me after delivering the 4th letter. Maybe you should at least talk to her. People don't change that fast, I replied. And even if she has, she's changing for the wrong reasons. She's not becoming a better person because she wants to grow. She's becoming whatever she thinks will get me back. But Isabella wasn't just targeting me through friends. She began reaching out to my family members, starting with my mom's Facebook account. That sweet girl Isabella sent me such a nice message, my mom told me during our weekly call. She said she made terrible mistakes and was hoping I could help her understand how to make things right with you. Isabella had crafted the perfect message for my mother, humble, remorseful, mentioning specific conversations about family traditions, recipes shared, even asking about my grandmother's health. It was calculated manipulation designed to make my mother feel invested in Isabella's redemption story. The campaign escalated when Isabella somehow obtained my work schedule and began appearing at places where she knew I'd be. She'd show up at the coffee shop near my office during lunch breaks, positioning herself where I'd have to see her. She'd wear outfits I used to compliment, order drinks I'd introduced her to, carry books I'd recommended, all designed to trigger nostalgic memories. When I started avoiding that coffee shop, she switched to the gym where I worked out after hours. I'd finish a set and find her on a treadmill across the room, making eye contact through the mirror and offering sad, hopeful smiles that felt invasive. She'd time her workouts to end when mine did, creating opportunities for awkward parking lot encounters. "Derek, please, can we just talk for 5 minutes?" she asked one evening after following me to my car. "I know you hate me, but I need you to know how sorry I am." "I don't hate you, Isabella," I told her honestly. "But I also don't want to talk to you. What we had is over. But I've changed. I'm not the same person who hurt you. Maybe you have changed. But I've changed too, and the person I am now doesn't want to be in your life." The most disturbing escalation came when she started appearing at places I'd never mentioned to anyone, hiking trails, grocery stores in neighborhoods she'd never visited, even the bookstore where I'd started spending Saturday mornings. The coincidences were too frequent and specific to be accidental. She was essentially stalking me with professional help. "This is getting creepy," David observed. "You might need to consider a restraining order." But Isabella was smart enough to never cross legal lines. She never approached aggressively, never made threats, never did anything that couldn't be explained as coincidental. She was just omnipresent in a way that felt suffocating, like I couldn't exist in Portland without seeing her sad, hopeful face reminding me of everything I was supposedly throwing away. The final confrontation came at Marcus and Jenny's wedding reception 6 months after Isabella's world had imploded. I debated skipping the event entirely, knowing she'd be there as Jenny's college roommate, but I refused to let her existence dictate my choices anymore. I arrived solo, confident in the life I'd rebuilt, wearing a suit that actually fit properly. Isabella cornered me during cocktail hour, appearing beside me at the bar with desperate timing. She looked smaller than I remembered, wearing a dress that seemed borrowed, her hair shorter and less styled than the Instagram perfect waves she'd maintained during our relationship. "Derek, please, just 5 minutes," she said, barely audible over the reception music. "I know you don't want to see me, but I need to say this." I could have walked away, but something in her tone suggested this might finally be the end rather than another manipulation attempt. "Okay," I said simply. 5 minutes. What followed was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Isabella talked about therapy, about learning to recognize her patterns of using people for security, about realizing she'd destroyed the only relationship where someone had actually loved her for who she was. "I see couples now, real couples, and I finally understand what we had," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You never tried to change me or show me off. You just loved me, and I threw it away because I thought love was supposed to feel like winning a prize." She talked about Damien, about how quickly his charm had turned to cruelty. "He never knew my middle name," she said with a bitter laugh. "You knew my coffee order, my favorite books, what made me laugh when I was stressed. You knew me, and I convinced myself that wasn't enough." When she finished, she looked at me with acceptance rather than hope. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I understand what I lost. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too stupid to appreciate it until it was gone." I considered my response carefully, feeling oddly peaceful. "I'm glad you're in therapy," I said finally. "I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for, Isabella." But our story ended exactly when it was supposed to. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." "You did deserve them," I said, surprising myself. "Just not the way you thought you did." I walked away without anger or bitterness, leaving Isabella standing alone by the bar. Later, wedding guests would comment on the gray side shown. Watching her broken apology, I realized that my decision to respond with dignity rather than drama had protected not just my mental health, but my capacity for peace. I was finally completely free.